Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
What AJ essentially showed us was what the experience in interfacing with HomeOS and lab things would look like for you as a researcher deploying the study or your participants. What I'm going to focus on is like you as a researcher, what does it take to get to that stage essentially? So let's start with like a home you want to do a deployment, and let's say you are interested in a couple of devices and you already have HomeOS through us. So the first thing I think you need to do here is you may or may not have what we call essentially scouts or drivers for these devices. If you don't, you'll basically write a scout. A scout is a very simple thing that goes and finds devices on the network, and the whole goal is to actually do an automatic search on the network so your users don't have to configure the exact details on how to communicate or contact the device. The reason I've shown it in green is that we think of scouts as a shared community resource that, like, if somebody has written a scout already, you don't have to write one. And there's only one scout needed for every protocol type. So you need one for Z-Wave, for instance, one for Synapse Wireless, for instance, which DoorJam is based on. So not per device, but kind of per protocol that the device speaks. And we've written a few ourselves. So suppose you get a scout that can discover those devices, the next thing you need are drivers. So drivers are essential entities that understand the functionality of the device. So it's not just a protocol level thing. It understands, that's a camera, that's a moisture sensor, and so forth. And again, this is green because we think of like drivers as essentially a shared community resource. If somebody else has written a driver, you don't need to write one yourself. So in this case, we've actually written drivers for both of these devices. That's why they're here and there. So now with drivers, essentially what drivers do in HomeOS is they basically export the functionality of the devices in really simple terms that we call roles. So think of roles as like, if you're familiar with web services or something, you've got essentially an interface with some operations. So in this case, you have a role like a sensor, which basically says on trigger, alert me. And you have a roll camera that says get current image. This is what the alerts application was doing. Or you could say, whenever a new image comes in, alert me. This is what the camera viewer app was doing in our case. So based on these roles, essentially what you develop is your research application. So this is the prototype that you have to write. Nobody else can write it for you. But the reason it's easy to write is because you don't have to worry about the details of the device or the protocol. Instead, you program against these roles. So this is basically kind of like a single home view of what goes on. The other thing that you have to write is basically just a user interface for your application. Again, this is something that nobody else can write for you, but we make it easy because you can write it in HTML5, and then you can get it on all the range of devices you have. So in this case, like a tablet in there. So these are the yellow pieces in here are basically what you as a researcher need to develop, and green will somebody else will develop, and blue is what exists as part of the platform. So going now, where does the cloud come in? So basically, I think HomeOS and cloud integrate in actually four key ways. One is what we call like the updater. So this is a service that is running in the cloud through which, by interacting with it, you can actually update all aspects of your experiment. You can even change the HomeOS code. You found a bug in your application or driver, you can change that too, in which case Erin would now go fix her DoorJam driver or the app, whatever is broken. So you can basically control basically every single aspect, and we've stonewalled them nicely in the sense you don't accidentally shoot yourselves in the foot, that we've separated the update of the core platform itself from the update of the apps and the drivers and from the update of the configuration itself. And I think there's documentation on that detail. So this is basically you've done an early deployment, figured out things are not working or you want to add features, you'll basically interact with the updater. A second piece we built in what we call the monitor. So monitor is essentially doing keeping tabs on how your study is progressing. So it basically looks for things like, is HomeOS running or not? Is your application running or not, or did it die? If your application is running, how many resources is it consuming? There could be like a while true loop in there that got triggered, for instance, in which case your entire system is useless. So it's doing both essentially availability as well as resource monitoring, so to speak. The third piece is data logger. Data logger are basically APIs that we let our applications use, and using these simple APIs, you can deposit any application-specific data to the cloud. And you basically call simple stream open, stream close operations, and your data magically shows up in the cloud there. A final piece is relayer. This is, it's mostly essentially either for you or for your participants, essentially the same UI that you wrote that works in the house, magically works outside the house as well, without your users requiring any kind of router reconfiguration and so forth. And because it's in HTML5, shows up in all devices, and because we built a relayer, you don't need separate interfaces for in-home, out-home, and whatnot. So these are the pieces. So as a researcher, your interface to the whole lab of things would be something like this. If you want to update your configuration, we've written this thing, or in particular, Ray has written this thing we call Configuration Explorer. You can take a look at what configuration is running right now, or you can just through the same UI, you can update what's running. If you want to monitor, basically this, you saw a snapshot of this like in AJ's demo. Basically, we built a management portal that shows what are all the hubs are that are part of your study, and essentially what their status is, what modules, drivers, or apps are running, what was the last time it was shown online, and so forth. There's a data logger which you can explore through any number of Azure Storage Explorer apps. This is just kind of one of them, and we believe this is for lightweight exploration. You did a deployment, and you quickly want to check, is the data coming from that house or not? You'll use one of these like third-party storage explorers to see whether the data is coming in the cloud or not. But in the end, of course, like you will write your own analysis script that runs against the data. But the nice thing is you don't have to fetch the data. We fetch the data for you. You just write your analysis scripts against Azure API, so to speak. So that is, again, kind of in yellow there. And this is basically, I think, the system. So just to kind of sum up, I think the entire system essentially looks like this. The blue pieces are pieces that are part of the platform, a third party. The green, we believe the community will develop with us as scouts and drivers, and you as somebody conducting studies, you'll have to write your own application, an interface for the application if it needs it, and conduct your analysis on it. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Ujman, and we're happy to answer any questions anytime.
Thank you.